I think it's counting down for you, Alan.
Well, yeah, I see that.
We don't know what's going to happen with it.
My love. Well, while we're doing that, and we probably have to call the TV room.
Can we run down there and get them?
Yeah, wait, we'll give him one more shot through the... And they'll walk in and wave their hand and it'll all work. Wanted to mention to you that we will be collecting checks today for, did someone already say this?
No.
Oh, for the First Choice Stay on Live television campaign. When you do this, you make your check payable to the church, First Methodist Houston, and in the memo section you put First Choice / Live TV. And okay, and they will correctly credit it. That's something, we've had a change in personnel and finance, so you want to write that on your memo section so that they don't make a mistake. Okay?
You'll keep us updated, Alan,
Well, I
as
think,
best you can?
yeah, I think we got $10,000 last Sunday, and nobody knew we were going to do it, and so we ought to reach our goal this Sunday. There's right here, right? Well, I'm an optimist today. No, I'm not, but I try to be. While we're waiting for this to work, let me bring you up to date with a couple of things. Last week we learned that Abraham was told by God that his name would be great. I will make your name great. That was not the same as the Tower of Babel incident, in which the people were building the tower in order to make their names great. This is a distinction. Now, David is going to be told the same thing. I will make your name great. What? Oh, okay. We have to get to the project computer thing. I could have that in my pocket. You want me to do it, or are you getting it? Got it? I just knew. Thank you. Okay, we got to remember then that the I've got so many wires on. The microphone I used is still in my ear. No. I was just seeing if I spoke into this, would be also. Don't do it. No, don't do it. I'm happy. Thank you. The interesting thing is that the promise to Abraham is irrevocable. It doesn't depend on Abraham's obedience. It's a statement that the covenant says, when God made a promise to Abraham, because he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, I will surely bless you and multiply you. And thus Abraham, having patiently endured, obtained the promise. You've given oaths for being a witness or testifying, and in this particular case, God is giving an oath, and he's affirming it himself. there wasn't anybody else to affirm it. There isn't anybody higher than he is, so he affirms it. Look at verse 17. In the same way, when God desired to show even more clearly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of the promise, he guaranteed it by an oath, so that through two unchangeable things, in which it is impossible that God would prove false, we who have taken refuge might be strongly encouraged to seize the hope set before us. We have this hope, a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters the inner shrine behind the curtain. In the Jewish temple, the separation between the court of the men and the court of Israel and the Holy of Holies was actually two curtains. This author doesn't know that. He says behind the veil of the curtain, talking about into the Holy of Holies. The fascinating thing is, and there's only a few texts, not in the Bible, but in external readings, that tell us there were two curtains, and you went between them, or went into one and then into the next. So, the covenant with Abraham contains promises that are further developed by later covenants, and it's the promise of land that creates a misunderstanding and impacts us today. For example, the promise of ownership of the land does not assure occupation of the land. So when you read that Abraham was promised this land, that's correct, but it doesn't say when or how he will occupy that land. Now, when we look at the next ones we're going to look at today, land is a factor in the Palestinian covenant. Blessings is foundational to the Mosaic and to the New Covenants, while the promise of seed, descendants, is paramount to the Davidic covenant. We don't always see the path that God has laid out, and it's sometimes difficult to see his redemptive plan when we look at these earlier covenants. So let's go to the next one. The choice of Abraham and the unconditional promises of land and nationhood have as their ultimate goal the blessing of all the earth's communities. One of the things that we will learn as we go through today is that what God has planned and what he's doing, besides being irrevocable, will require action on the part of the people receiving the covenant. The beginning of redemptive history offers a word about the end. The salvation promised Abraham would ultimately embrace all humankind. God has not dismissed the human family in wrath forever, but now acts to mend the breach that sin has placed between him and his world. This was William Lasore concludes the paragraph by saying this promise stands as a key to understanding all of Scripture. What does he mean? The promise is that what's being done through the Hebrew people is to bless the whole world. And that's something that we need to hold on to, because that's the issues today in Israel. Lasore was born in October 1911 in Philadelphia. I mention this because of all the people that I've read that do footnotes, appear in footnotes to other people's texts, this guy's the most qualified. And we've never heard of him. He served in the Navy, and then in 1949 he received the Doctor of Philosophy degree from Dropsy College What? Dropsy College in Pennsylvania. Well, let's think about that a moment. It was Dropsy College of Hebrew and Cognate Learning in Philadelphia. It's now called the Center for Advanced Judaic Studies. It is the place that the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi, went with his son. I'm sorry, he was the son. His father went to this and took Bibi with him, and that's where the young man, who's now Prime Minister, learned about biblical history there at Dropsy College. It still exists. It was absorbed by the University of Pennsylvania, but it's called the Center for Advanced Judaic Studies. He's got a Doctor of Theology degree from the University of Southern California. He held 6 degrees, ranging from chemistry to Oriental languages and literature, and he spoke 20 languages. Good gracious. How did we not know about him? It's absolutely amazing, but more amazing is that Dropsy College was the place that the Prime Minister of Israel's father went and took him with him. So,
This guy's written any books?
he's written 17 books. I don't have any of them. So, and his library is at Oral Roberts University. I would let you know he's Presbyterian. Okay, so let's go to the Mosaic Covenant. Oh, you did that to me last week. Is that really Christian? One day you're going to find out. The covenant is struck, the Mosaic Covenant, when God gives his divine law to Moses on Mount Sinai. The covenant not only institutes the laws of the Ten Commandments, it also reaffirms many of the promises to Abraham. Within this, the new program I have, if I get close to spelling a word, it sometimes assumes it. That should be the covenant. It says this combat. I'm sorry, I can go spell check it, but it doesn't help me. 1, it promises to bless Israel. 2, multiply the nation. 3, give Israel the land. 4, make a great nation. 5, be Israel's God. 6, confirm his covenant with the generation living then. And then that's very important because the previous covenants were unconditional, but would materialize in an indefinite future. In other words, you're going to get the land sometime. You own the land. You'll occupy it sometime. Well, unlike the covenant to Abraham, which promised the land at some future time, this covenant gives the opportunity to realize partially on the land. When Joshua goes into Canaan and they become victorious and Canaan becomes their home, that's not all of the land that was promised. This is a partial occupation of the promised land. You have seen, God says, what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession out of all the peoples. Please note, you keep my covenant, you obey my rules. That's new. Up until then, Abraham didn't have to be obedient. That wasn't a condition of the covenant. Now there's a condition of the covenant. You will be my treasured possession if you keep the rules. Now, he goes on to say, indeed the whole earth is mine, but you shall be for me a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the Israelites. The words are, you will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And the people say, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. The covenant is, you get this, but you got to keep the rules. They say, hallelujah, we'll keep the rules. But they don't. Okay. Now, what we have to learn from that is God is not exclusively concerned with Israel, because he's making the people of Israel be priests and a holy nation. For what purpose? To carry that word into the world. It's sort of like the purpose of our country originally. So, the Mosaic Covenant provides Israel with 3 types of law: moral, civil, and ceremonial, that arise from 613 specific commandments. How many of those can you name? It's very close to the IRS code. The moral law encompasses the 10 Commandments, while the civil law found in Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Exodus cover Israel's civil and social life. And after reading that, I've concluded at some point I'm going to have to teach Leviticus.
Yes.
I don't want to do that, I can tell you. But in order to fill it in, I need to do that. I've told you before that I was teaching a course on who wrote the Bible, and there was a couple who were missionary Baptists trying to convert me. And I was teaching it and told them Leviticus shouldn't even be in the Bible. That was pretty cocky, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes.
So they started a Sunday school class. And the first subject they taught was loving Leviticus. That was aimed directly at me. And it should have been. Now, they're not members of the church anymore. I had nothing to do with that. But they found out that Leviticus isn't the favorite book for people to study. But we're going to look at it. I've made mistakes before, and that was one of them. Rules, then there's the ceremonial laws, and that's the rules covering sacrifice, offerings. It has to do with the tabernacle, the priest's clothing, and that part of the law is to assist people to approach their holy God, which they could not do without a mediator. So, there we go. A key element of the Mosaic law is the blood sacrifice, set out in Leviticus 17:11. It reads, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you for making atonement for your lives on the altar. For as life, it is the blood that makes atonement." J. Vernon McGee, who you can still hear on KHCB Sunday afternoon, gravelly voice, he taught the Bible, I don't know, he had a program to teach it in a year, but he says that the life is in the blood. This is a great eternal truth, explaining why Abel's sacrifice and not Cain's was acceptable. In Hebrews 9:22, Indeed, under the law, almost everything is purified with blood. And without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness of sins. In Hebrew, the word atonement means the covering of sin, not its removal. This is an important thing. When you think of the original vocabulary, and we're talking about the covering of sin, not taking it away, if it meant renewal, the annual Day of Atonement would be unnecessary. I don't know if you've ever been to the Jewish ceremony on the Day of Atonement. I have had the privilege of doing that twice, actually 3 times. When the synagogue was here in our sanctuary, and twice when it was at West Chase. Well, on the idea of the Day of Atonement celebrated by the Jews, when the priest has finished, when the rabbi has finished with the service, the sins that are acknowledged are forgiven for the past, not for 1 minute after the service is over. There is no forgiveness of sins for the future. None at all. So this Day of Atonement, which we understand to be a great high holy day for the Jew, is something that we would struggle with because Christ has forgiven our sins for now and tomorrow. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Okay, but not for them in their belief structure. Now,
The difference is cleansing of sins.
what?
Cleansing of your sins, Christ cleansed your sins.
Yes.
Cleansing means more different than covering.
Well, it is. Cleansing would be more different than covering. But the word atonement, when we understand it, doesn't mean what most of us thought it meant. Well, if it meant in the future, the Day of Atonement would not necessarily have to be celebrated again. So, the Old Testament longs for the Messiah, whose blood will make permanent the forgiveness of sins. But in the Old Testament, that blood they may be anticipating, but the blood of the Lamb that's celebrated on the Day of Atonement did not go past the day on which it was celebrated. You got it? That would be sort of discouraging.
Is it still that way?
It's still that way. For the Jews that are traditional, the Messianic Jews would be on the side of forgiveness in the future. Okay, so the covenant for Abraham should be understood as the theological backbone undergirding the Mosaic covenant without replacing it. It is meant to last until the coming of the Messiah. The law cannot bring salvation. That can be attained only through Christ. And today, because Christ has come, the Mosaic covenant has passed away. It drops out of the Christian theology because it's finished. When Christ came, then the idea of the temporary application of blood is done with. So, does that mean that the 10 Commandments have passed away? Nope. But in this age, the age of the church, the commandments have been modified. Can you think of a couple of commandments that have been modified? The commandment on adultery had to do with you commit adultery, it's a capital offense. Today you commit adultery and you might get kicked out of the church. You're not going to be killed. And the statement about honoring your parents has been modified in the church today so that it doesn't mean that your life would be long. It meant you honor your parents so that your can enjoy life. It's sort of like the day will come when we will be like a t-ball game where nobody wins. You know, have you ever been to a t-ball game recently?
Oh, yeah, it's frustrating.
Everybody gets a trophy. What? There are no winners. There are no losers. We all played, and we got a trophy. There's a wonderful commercial of a black coach who has put his son in the SUV, and he's looking at the trophy. And he says, "You mean everybody got one of these trophies?" Yeah. He says, "You participated." So he rips that off. And he writes on there that he won. He puts on a statement that points to the fact that his kid is a superstar. Well, I don't know how many of you regard yourselves as millennials. I'm going easy. I wanted to, you've reduced the age, average age today remarkably well. Millennials don't win or lose either. They were raised in that generation. They don't even read very well because they've got their own vocabulary. You do your cell phone and you make up words that convey to the other end of the line something that they understand, but that your parents wouldn't understand if they looked at it. And you got a new vocabulary. Well, never mind. It just goes on and on and on. But this too shall pass, the ancient Persians said. The millennials will grow into an older generation. All right. When Israel doesn't obey, it is subject to the curses and punishment of God. Although those curses and punishments include the dispersion of the people, the covenant also includes restoration of the people and the eventual regathering of the people to the land where they will live prosperously and faithfully while he will punish their enemies. So the covenant relationship says, okay, you've sinned. We're sending you to Babylon. That's your punishment. But I want you to know there will be an ingathering of the people in the land promised to them subsequently. So, I will pour out a spirit of compassion and supplication on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that when they look on the one whom they have pierced, they shall mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and weep bitterly over him as one weeps over a firstborn. On that day, the mourning in Jerusalem will be as great as the mourning for Hadad Rimmon in the plain of Megiddo. This is a prophecy from Zechariah, and what does it say? There is going to be great mourning in the land. But the days are surely coming, says the Lord, when the city shall be rebuilt for the Lord from the tower of Hanel to the corner gate, and the measuring line shall go out farther, straight to the hill Garib, and shall then turn to Goath. The whole valley of the dead bodies and the ashes, and all the fields as far as the Wadi Kidron, to the corner of the horse gate, towards the east, shall be sacred to the Lord. It shall never again be uprooted or overthrown. Well, let's see if we can put that in proportion. Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah are making a prophecy about 400 years before the Babylonian captivity. They're getting a view of the future which says, all of this is going to happen to you because of what you've done today. But let me tell you, you will be ingathered in the land. Jerusalem will be expanded, made bigger, made wonderful. Why? Because you have repented of your sins. Oh, that's pretty remarkable when you think about it. Today, this is 2,500 years after the Babylonian captivity. Where is Israel? It's been returned to the land in 1948, and millions of Jews have moved back there. So is the prophecy given in 586 BC being fulfilled in our lifetime? Yes, it is. If you ever want to think about that, think about this. No country in all of history, when it's been moved out of its homeland, has lasted longer than 50 years. How long has Israel lasted? You have to come to the conclusion that they are blessed. There can't be any other conclusion. How long have we been here? 220 some odd years? We haven't been dispossessed of our land yet, so we are still viable. But bear in mind, not only do countries who've lost their land or been moved out for 50 years, not only do they cease to be a country, they also cease to be a language. Very important. How long has Hebrew been spoken? Oh, it's beyond, longer than I'm old, so. Forever. Yeah, thank you.
But we're a mixture, Alan. We're not pure people that the Israelis were.
That's correct. We are a mixture. And they are now too. Yes?
So there's an interesting article in yesterday's Wall Street Journal about Israel, and whole multi-page article. Did you read it, Claude?
Yeah.
And I just found that popped in my mind talking about this, and when you talk about people displaced and languages going on, it's the Mideast is full of ancient languages.
That's true. But the bulk of them are Semitic languages,
Yes.
which come from Noah's son Shem. Ooh, what? Well, anyway, let's talk about the Davidic covenant next. This is a difficult one because God promised David that his descendants would rule Israel forever, and that he will elevate the nation to a kingdom under the rule of kings in David's line forever. You remember that at Christmas time we always read about the Messiah and the fact that his rule will be forever. Well, look at it this way. David's line forever, the text goes on to say, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. It shall crush the borderlands of Moab, and the territory of the Shinites. Edom will become a possession. Seir, a possession of its enemies, while Israel does valiantly. One out of Jacob shall rule and destroy the survivors of Edom. Well, I'm sorry this is so small. this new program,
But you guys, the army of millennials are here?
yes, I am. This is I'm sorry that it's little. I spent probably 30 minutes trying to make it full size. I don't understand it.
I got it full size on the video, on mine.
You got it full size?
So they have to go to the website next week.
See how quick he did that?
Yeah, oh, it's fascinating.
And I'm not even a millennial.
You're not. On that day, the Lord will extend his hand yet a second time to recover the remnant that is left of this people from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathos, from Ethiopia, from Elam, from Shinar, from Hathroth, and from the coastlands of the sea. He will raise a signal for the nations and will assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. And that's what happened. The thing that's fascinating, and this is the hard thing, and you have to listen closely because it's not going to be on your screen. David's family line were assassinated. So when it says, the kingdom of David shall be forever, his heirs will be on the throne forever, there was a point in time when adversaries of David subsequently assassinated family members. So is that what the text meant? That David's line physically would last forever? I don't think that's what it meant. Because later we're going to be told that the Son of God is physical and spiritual. If we look at the commitment to David as being a spiritual commitment, then within those descendants of David who may not have been on the organizational chart, but who believed in the future of Israel, who believed in the credibility of David, who believed in all of these covenants which have been given, then David's line still exists. Do you follow me? We have to make an adjustment in thought from what scholars and critics of the Bible constantly say. David's line was assassinated. Physically, to the best of our knowledge, it was. But you can't tell me that the inspiration of David didn't live on. Well, think about what you're going to be leaving behind. Our obligation as parents and friends is to be able to influence future generations by the way that we lived. Is that correct? Can we assume, therefore, that David's friends, family, neighbors lived their lives in such a way that they inspired other people?
A question?
Yes.
Would David's covenant exist if the Jewish people hadn't wanted a king?
It would not exist.
Well, I mean, was that a plan of God's, or was that a demand of the Jewish people saying, we want a king? And God told them, you know, I'm not good enough to be your king.
The question was, would the Davidic line have been there if the Hebrew people had not chosen to have a king? No, it would not have been. They wanted a king because everybody had kings and everybody was beating up on them, and so they assumed, well, it's because they had a king. God relented and let them have a king.
He tried to convince them not to.
Yeah, he did. He tried to
But
say,
even before David, if they depend on God in battle, they won.
the question was, or statement was that even before David, if they depended on God in battle, they won. I think sometimes they won, but
Nobody won them all.
he's made a profound statement that nobody wins them all. Point being,
There's some losers.
if you, those of you who've had children, you look at the children that you've raised and you see yourself either good or bad in what they have become. Is that right? Unless you kicked them out early. One of the wealthiest men in Houston was put out of his house when he was a young man, probably 13. And he had to struggle. He got a job at the River Oaks drugstore, sweeping out the place. Then he got a job at the River Oaks Theater, taking up tickets. And he learned that, gee whiz, I could let my friends in for half price and pocket that half, and he did. And then he learned that he could go to the Houston Post, little thing you put your money in and get the paper. He could put his nickel or dime in and take out 20 papers and then sell them. And that's what he did. And then as he grew older, he became a distributor of Kirby vacuum cleaners. They used to go door to door. I don't know if you remember that. They were heavy. You couldn't lift them to carry them up the steps. But he went up to the Coshado Indian Reservation and sold them there. They didn't even have electricity. He became a man who owned, at one point, 150 shopping centers in Houston. Remarkable. As he got married a Baptist. He was Jewish. The point is, what does he look at for the generation that follows him? His kids. Will they carry on the image, or will they modify their image? Everybody has a contribution to make in life that influences people for good or bad. And the fact that maybe your family wiped out in an automobile accident, that doesn't mean that the life you lived ended. It continues on in friends. It continues on in this class. So my point is that while the heirs of David were assassinated, David lived on. Now, he wasn't a good guy, but he's like us. I didn't have 10 wives, but you see my point? If you look at the Bible and say, oh, David's heirs, the line didn't continue, the Bible's meaningless. That's not it at all. And you know it isn't. And maybe we don't want to recognize that because it puts a burden on us to live better than we do so that we might be an influence in the future. Think about it. Next week, we'll do the Holy Covenant, which occurs in the New Testament. Okay? Have you got any problems with today? Do you have any problems with today? Our millennial member? I'm glad you're here.
What is this picture of?
What?
Where'd you get this?
Well, this is just a screensaver from Apple. It isn't a picture I took. I've enjoyed this. Yeah, right. I don't even know where it is.
Yosemite.
Oh, okay.
Alan, there's a good book I read quite a while ago, but it's just called The Views.
Yosemite Valley. El Capitan.
Yeah.
Half Dome.
And where they've been all over the world. Now, they
Yeah,
were
that's
treated-
half done.
Everywhere.
In the back.
They're really treated well.
We're going to be there in May.
Yep, that's true.
Awesome.
No, I think that's right. Okay, I'm finished. Bye.